Hello and welcome to the Shakespeare podcast. Today we'll be asking the question, what is the Merchant of Venice about? Well, there are many different themes that we might like to consider when discussing the Merchant of Venice. Number one is the play about Christian symbolism, particularly with regards to the story of the caskets. Or maybe this Christian theme can be seen in light of the Jewish character Shylock, and why Shylock helps to dominate the play. Conversely, we might also like to consider the role of the female characters in The Merchant of Venice and ask the question, isn't Portia the real hero of the play? And finally, we might like to consider the role of interracial marriage and interracial relationships and multiculturalism in the play. So let's take a look at the casket story and the Christian symbolism that it contains. The contest for Portia's hand, in which various men from different countries choose either a gold, a silver or a lead casket, of course, looks on the surface very much like the Venice of the play. The caskets present the same opportunity to different men of various nations and ethnicities and religions. But the hidden bias of the casket test is fundamentally Christian. So the gold casket bears the inscription, "Who chooseth me shall gain what men desire." The silver casket says, "Who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves." And the correct casket, which is lead, warns that the person who chooses it must give and risk everything he has. So this context test combines a number of different Christian ideas. The idea that desire is an unreliable guide and should be resisted. All that glitters is not gold, is told the Prince of Morocco when he opens the gold casket. Christianity teaches that appearances are often deceiving. In the second casket, the silver one, there is the idea that human beings do not deserve God's grace, but receive it in spite of themselves. And faith and charity are the central values of Christianity. These values are to be found in the lead casket's injunction to give all and to risk all, as one does in making a leap of faith. So the casket contest presents us as one in which the proper suitor, the correct man, risks and gives everything for Portia, in the hope of a recompense he can never truly deserve. In that way, the contest certainly suits Bassanio, who does not deserve his good fortune, but is willing to risk everything in a gamble. However, we might also note that Bassanio has the added advantage of being helped by Nerissa, Portia's lady-in-waiting. And all this, of course, may be a foil, a contrast with Shylock, the Jewish moneylender, for his Jewishness is central to the play, but it also helps to highlight the Christian characters and some of their values. Firstly, it's important to recognise that Shylock is really Shakespeare's creation. There's nothing else like Shylock in Elizabethan drama. For contrast, take Barabbas, the central Jewish character in Christopher Marlowe's The Jew of Malta, which was written a few years before The Merchant of Venice. Barabbas is a thoroughly bad cat who murders loads of people, including his own daughter Abigail, and he plans to boil somebody alive in oil. Spoiler alert, Barabbas ends up being the one. He ends up in his own pot of boiling oil, as you might expect. Shylock's nothing like Barabbas, and The Merchant of Venice is, as you may have noticed, devoid of violence. Where Marlowe's The Jew of Malta is full of violence, The Merchant of Venice has no violence in it. And Shylock's arguments for why he dislikes Christians are pretty good. From Shylock's idea that you don't like me lending money at interest, but it's my money and I can do with it what I want, to his famous line about all racial prejudice: if you prick us, do we not bleed? There are only 4 scenes in which Shylock appears. For reference, these are Act 1, Scene 3, Act 2, Scene 5, Act 3, Scene 1 and 3, and Act 4, the courtroom scene. Yet Shylock seems to be in more of the play because he's mentioned so much by all the other characters. Antonio and Bassanio discuss him. Lorenzo, Jessica, Gratanio, they all talk about Shylock, and that makes his presence in the play feel greater than what it actually is. However, there's also more of a hint here that Shakespeare has drawn Shylock as a tragic hero. In Act 1, Shylock speaks in a type of poetry known as iambic pentameters. It's a poetry that Shakespeare normally reserves for kings and heroes. And of course, it's in Act 1, Scene 3 that Shylock outwits Antonio. Whatever way you interpret that scene, Shylock comes out with what he wants. His tragic descent, first losing his daughter and his money, and then his case against Antonio and all his property before being forced to convert to Christianity, is chronicled in a very organised and deft manner by Shakespeare. It's almost as if Shakespeare is leading us with Shylock through all his descent, tragic descent, to the end of Act 4. And what does Shylock's treatment tell us about Christian values? Shylock himself points out that although Christians are supposed to be forgiving, he hasn't seen much evidence of that, and neither do we as the audience. In fact, Shylock is treated so badly that it makes the happy ending in Act 5 somewhat incongruous. One of these things is not like the other. That's not right, Mr. Noodle. Sir Henry Irving is normally given the credit for portraying the Grand Shylock, as he's known. That is, Shylock as the true hero of the play, which makes you wonder how earlier productions missed Shylock's part altogether. Hang on a minute, say some Shakespeare scholars, as some Shakespeare scholars are wont to say. All this talk about Shylock is missing the real point of the play. Surely the hero of The Merchant of Venice is Portia. She's central to both the story of the caskets and the pound of flesh story. If Shylock outwits Antonio in Act 1, Scene 3, surely it's Portia who outwits Shylock in the courtroom scene in Act 4. Surely it's Portia and Nerissa who decide who their husbands will be, and then they outwit their husbands with the story about the rings. Surely the real point is that The Merchant of Venice is Shakespeare's feminist play, in which the women are the smart ones who outwit all the men. Portia outwits Shylock, but so does Jessica, another woman who picks her own husband and doesn't let the different religions between her and Lorenzo get in the way of her marriage. The Merchant of Venice is a play about powerful women who fashion the world around them, and they don't rely on men for anything. The play is therefore Shakespeare's contribution to the femisphere. As Portia says in Act 1, Scene 2, "If I live to be as old as Sybil, I will die as chaste as Diana." Finally, there's the simple question of interracial marriage in The Merchant of Venice. In Act 1, we're told that the Prince of Morocco has come to Belmont seeking the hand of Portia in marriage. Act 2, Scene 1 starts with the Prince of Morocco, who begins by saying, "Mislike me not for my complexion." And Portia responds by saying that she's not going to do that because she digs black guys. I'm paraphrasing here. But the Prince of Morocco is presented as a real catch. He's rich, he's smart, and he's a hero. His classical references in his speech are designed to impress Portia with his education and erudition, something that doesn't happen a lot these days. Of course, the Prince of Morocco ultimately picks the wrong casket and leaves. But the sense remains that he could have been Portia's husband, and that there would have been nothing particularly strange about that. Then there's the marriage of Jessica and Lorenzo. Much is made in the play of the fact that Jessica is Jewish and Lorenzo is Christian. In Act 2, Scene 6, as Lorenzo and Jessica are eloping, Gratiano, who's helping Lorenzo elope with his beloved, turns to Lorenzo and basically says, "Really? A Jewish chick?" And Lorenzo says, "What can I do? I'm in love." I'm paraphrasing again, but check out Act 3, Scene 6 from lines 50 onwards. In Act 3, Scene 5, Jessica is asked a similar question about marrying a Christian by Lancelot the clown, and also about the nature of salvation now that she's Christian. But it's her husband Lorenzo who answers Lancelot by pointing out that Lancelot has got a black woman pregnant, as Lorenzo says, by getting up the Negro's belly, the Moor's with child by you, Lancelot. Lancelot is sometimes simply called the clown. He answers with a joke, a play on the word Moor, M-O-O-R, and More, M-O-R-E. Lancelot's asking Jessica about marrying a Christian, and Lorenzo's suggesting that he can't talk about interracial relationships as he's got a black woman pregnant. The point about Act 5 and Lorenzo and Jessica in the garden listening to music is that they're perfectly happy together. They recount their romance and elopement in a happy and comedic fashion, almost as if it's a good thing. So that's just a few things that you might want to consider when discussing The Merchant of Venice. To what extent is The Merchant of Venice a Christian play? Is Shylock the hero of the play? And is his story tragic? Do we follow Shylock's descent as a tragic hero? Is The Merchant of Venice a feminist play? Is it really about the women in the play? And do all these references to interracial relationships suggest that there's something more important here than just exoticism? Because The Merchant of Venice is definitely exotic and exciting. And it's also, remember, it's two fairy tales, the Pound of Flesh story and the Casket story, two fairy tales wrapped up into one play. I hope this podcast has made you think a little about The Merchant of Venice and what it's about. And we'll say goodbye for now. We'll see you next time on the Shakespeare podcast.